My grandma told everyone at my school that I'm, quote, into older guys, and now they all think that I'm freaky. My grandma is an interesting individual. One may place her in the Karen category. She's from a small town where you're either very well off and waspy, or you do smack and live in an old school that's been made into an apartment building. She's on the waspy side. Knows everything and everyone, always will find something about you to nitpick at. Fun times. The best times was 8th grade. She's a math teacher in my school for junior high. Oh boy, was that a dandy time. Because I was her granddaughter, that put a huge target on me. Every day she'd watch me like a hawk and wait for the split second I'd look away, then shout, "Susie, pay attention. Don't make me tell your mother you're goofing off in my class." And the whole class would giggle. She'd grin and her ego would inflate like swim shorts when you first walk into the water. One time, I accidentally wore slippers to school, and for the rest of the year she'd bring it up, like, "Can you not remember the equation like you couldn't remember your shoes?" Cue the malicious grins and laughter. But the straw that broke the camel's back was when I got a boyfriend. A bit of backstory here. I was held back in kindergarten, so I'm a year older than everyone in my 8th grade class. I was dating a boy in 10th grade, but he skipped ahead a grade, so he's actually a year younger than his 10th grade class. This made our age difference to be only about a year apart. However, from an outside perspective, when you hear a 10th grade boy is dating an 8th grade girl, I'm sure your first reaction would be like, ew. And boy did my grandma eat that up like it was her very last meal. Anytime we would visit, she'd make side comments like, "We know that she prefers older men, right? You know? If it was my child, I certainly wouldn't approve, but I guess times are a little different now." It was annoying, but it wasn't interfering with my life. That is, until she started to gossip about me to other teachers. She'd tell them that I was sneaking around with an older boy. I was probably experimenting with things not meant for my age. That I was going into teachers' lounges and bathrooms with him. She also heavily implied that my parents were against all of this. For context, my parents know how old both me and my boyfriend were and actually aren't crazy like Grandma. Also, my boyfriend was the quietest, nerdiest kid in his grade. It took us both 2 weeks of holding hands before we even kissed, so none of this was true. But that didn't stop the rumors. During lunch, I'd get asked by girls if it was true that I'd done certain deeds with him. If I was in class and I'd ask a teacher to use the restroom, they would refuse. And if they did let me go, they would interrogate me for several minutes first to make sure I wasn't sneaking off to, quote, do it with my older boyfriend. Before any of this, I was literally a fly on the wall and I was completely fine with that. Now I was miserable and I felt helpless. After coming home crying for who knows how many days in a row, my mum got fed up. I remember her screaming, "That's it!" grabbing her keys and storming out the door. When she returned, she said that Grandma wouldn't be bothering me anymore. Once I got older, she told me a brief summary of what happened. Basically, my mum arrived and approached her calmly. Explained to her that I was her child and she has control of the situation. She even explained the age difference. After asking her politely to back off and stop telling her lies to her co-workers, my teachers, Grandma scoffed and said, "You don't know what she could be doing behind closed doors. I'm just keeping an eye out for her." And this set my mum off. She told me that she started yelling at my grandma about shaming her own granddaughter and how miserable I was. She said she has no right to say or do any of this, and what she was doing was cruel and inappropriate. My grandma's response? "How dare you enter my home and accuse me of this? Get out of my house!" So my mum left. The next day, my grandma avoided eye contact with me. She didn't even try to call on me for answers or point out what kind of clothes I was wearing. She just averted her gaze and did her job. Finally. Rumors continued just for a little bit, but then people caught on that it wasn't really as scandalous as the rumors portrayed, and we were left alone. So, how did all of this end? Like you'd expect, Grandma acts like it never happened. Never brings it up. Avoids the conversations if they're around the time when she taught me. It's irritating, but at the same time, it's expected. Now I'm an adult and we're all aware of her silly ways, we can just smile and nod until we go home, where we can then rant about how mean she was during dinner. I have so many more Karen-like stories involving her. Alright, answering some questions and updates. My 10th grade boyfriend and I broke up a few months later. We were both young. We still talk occasionally and we're both doing fine with our lives. I never went to the principal because he was actually even worse than Grandma. The school we went to had a graduating class of under 75. The teachers were all hired because of status and relationships. The principal was a very angry man who would scream at us every lunch period like he was a military officer. So I didn't feel like I was supported at all by the staff in general. And that same principal married one of his elementary school students once she was 18. Now she's a teacher. If that gives you an idea on how things were run in the school. And by the way, that school is still thriving. It's surrounded by crystal heads and Republicans, so that must be it. My mum is the sassiest woman I know. I'm very lucky to have her as a role model. I don't know if I will ever actually try to bring up what happened with my grandma again, because in a way I can already hear in my head how it would go. I can even hear her voice turning into that crazy high-pitched, whiny shriek, and I like my eardrums too much to do that to them. When I have time, maybe I'll post another story about the time she made us all cry on Christmas. Yeah, this sounds like the kind of grandparent that we all just sort of tolerate rather than the one we have a close relationship with. Once we're no longer obligated to see them, that is. And my goodness, her views are so skewed. In her brain, looking out for her granddaughter and fabricating rumors that turn her into a pariah are one and the same thing. It must have been miserable living with that sort of stuff in any school, and the fact that the other educators bought into it and actively took actions against her is sick. And holy crap, can we talk about the facts that the author squeezed into the end about her school? What's going on there? A crazy military principal who's just sort of grooming a wife out of the students? Why is that okay and not a perfectly innocent relationship between two quiet nerdy kids? These accusations are all confessions, aren't they? And yes, the narrator did do a search for the gossip on how Grandma ruined Christmas, but he couldn't find anything. From the way they described her reaction after she was called out for her behavior, it sounds like this kind of granny tantrum, followed by just complete silence, was pretty normal for the family. So I'm sure they all continued to grit their teeth through future family gatherings anyway. I'm not going to pay for your comfort. So this happened last month. By some universe coincidences, me and my girlfriend ended up living with another couple in a rented house to split costs. It was a big house, so each couple would have their own bathroom, bedroom, and we shared the common places like the kitchen and the living room. The house was originally rented by a co-worker who by the time of this story was no longer in the house anymore, but all the furniture was his and he gifted it all to me when he left. This other couple was really annoying. They'd leave their dirty dishes in the sink with rotten food and didn't wash them until the weekend, or leave their dog to poop all over the house. One time, the guy was cooking in a torn-out pair of shorts and his underwear were very visible. This was really uncomfortable to my girlfriend. Anytime I talked to them about all the issues that bothered us, they used to change their habits for a few days and then it was all the same. But the house was rented and they arrived first, so I wasn't able to kick them out. And if I tried, I was afraid of the guy since he was a bad-tempered jerk. The last straw was this summer. It was really hot and these chuckle frickers liked to have the AC on at full blast day and night, even when they weren't home. And if I turned it off, they'd get mad and immediately turn it back on, after telling me how they couldn't sleep without the AC at max. Okay, I did my best to wear a hoodie and sleep with my winter clothes in the middle of the fricking summer inside my house, just so they'd be comfortable and for the sake of saving a few bucks in rent money. And of course, the inevitable happened. The electric bill came and it was 4 times higher than the usual. And it was a lot. So I talked to them about how their use of electricity was out of control and why we should split the bill 25-75. Since me and my girl are almost never home. It turned into a huge fight and his only argument was that we all used the electricity so we should all pay the same. He wouldn't listen to my arguments and there was nothing I could do. I ended up paying the same amount. After this absolute tool and his girlfriend made me pay for their comfort, they started doing a lot of passive-aggressive stuff, like throwing out my unspoiled food while they'd leave their rotten food in my fridge, or using their TV at the highest volume while I tried to sleep. I get up really early to exercise before work, so I go to sleep really early too. They did a lot of things like that in a very childish manner. This was in addition to leaving on every kind of electrical device in the house while they were out. Then I knew I had to get out of that house. There was no money saving anymore due to the high cost of the bills, so me and my girlfriend started to look for a place for only the two of us and our 2 rescued dogs. We found an affordable and comfortable house with plenty of room for our doggos, so we pulled the trigger. We talked to the owner of the previous house about us leaving and he had no problems at all. So it was all set. We waited until the other couple were out of town for the weekend and we took every last thing we owned out of that house and moved out. I'm including the stuff left to us by my old coworker, by the way. I left them without any furniture, and I mean no stove, no microwave, and not even a table to eat at. I left my keys at the entrance of their bedroom door and a note that said, "We couldn't bear your attitudes anymore, so we left with our belongings. Have a nice life, wasting your own money. Love, Steve." The owner of the house, who became a very good friend of mine later, told me that they told him how I took out all their belongings. He knew that they were mine and he told them as much. I wish I was there to have a look at their faces. Have fun eating fast food on the floor, jerks. In short, me and my girlfriend used to live with a couple of absolute monsters. We left with everything in the house. Was that too harsh? Were we the jerks? I'd say you were more or less justified. You got permission from your landlord, and honestly it sounds like they were sloppy, exploitative monsters. As somewhat of a clean freak, I can accept that there are certain habits from other people that you just have to accept, but come on, surely the line is drawn several kilometers before the point where you have rotten food and literal animal feces littering your apartment. In the words of the world's worst spy, this is how you get ants. But yeah, you got permission from your landlord, took your possessions, and clearly the owner thought you were completely justified in doing so. The fact that you apparently had a portable stove and could get the bonus satisfaction of leaving them without a means to cook food for themselves must have been particularly sweet. And then they went and confirmed what we were already thinking about them by making fraudulent claims that the author had stolen their property. I dread to think of the state of that place after the other two had moved out. The conditions there likely got into a state that one can only call squalid. I don't envy the desperate people that they likely tricked into moving in there with them afterwards, nor the abundance of bugs and vermin that their nasty habits likely would have brought in over the summer. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for celebrating my anniversary despite what happened at my wedding? My husband and I had our wedding last year. The venue was beautiful and bordered a lake. Unfortunately, during the reception, one of the young children snuck away from their parents and decided to go for a swim despite not being able to. This was tragic and devastating, and obviously cut the day short. We haven't really spoken to the parents since then, as we weren't close to them aside from seeing them on holidays, which haven't happened this year, 2020. We're still Facebook friends though. When our first anniversary came, I made a post celebrating our anniversary, with a few wedding photos. I didn't think anything of it until the comments came flooding in. I woke up to 30 comments and 15 missed calls. The top comment was from the mother of the child, who was outraged about it. She wrote a very long comment about how my post was disrespectful of the tragedy that had happened that day and how dare I post that and not mention her child, and of course not talk to her about posting first. 30 comments later, and it was clear that the entire family had clearly started taking sides in a battle I didn't even realize I'd created. As of today, we're at 150 comments. My friends and my parents are involved too. Half of his family is screaming for me to take it down, apologize to the parents, and show more respect, possibly by even celebrating our anniversary on a different day. Some of the family think that we should still be able to celebrate our anniversary on the actual day, but just to keep it offline to keep the peace. I don't think I did anything wrong with my post, and I feel like we should be allowed to celebrate our anniversary just like anyone else. I'm not celebrating the tragedy, I'm celebrating my wedding. Okay, so an update. I've changed the post to only be visible to me and deleted all the comments to try and stop the arguing. But from the email we just received, those comments were just a symptom of a larger problem. My mother-in-law sent us an email with, from what I can tell, roughly 3/4 of my husband's family CC'd in. His parents, grandparents, and the parents of the child are not only in the different day camp, but they're also demanding a second wedding. According to them, they've kept their silence for so long due to shock and being distracted by everything else going on this year, 2020 again. But they feel like because of what happened, me and my husband aren't really married yet in the eyes of the family. They, quote, understand that weddings are expensive. So they, the husband's parents, offered to completely pay for the second wedding that will be the real wedding in his family's eyes, and because it may be a year or two before this can be done safely, they will tolerate us living in sin indefinitely due to the circumstances. My husband hates arguing with his family, and I'm not sure how I would even approach this with my family without being laughed out of the room. So now we need to talk about what to do with this. Second update. I've never had this many calls in my life. My husband and I have tried to read through this and have gotten a chance to actually talk it out. We've avoided the subject for a long time because it's not an easy thing to think about, and it's not like this year hasn't had stresses of its own. He agrees that while something does need to happen, it's a priority that they start and continue to acknowledge that we are in fact married under law. I've had a conversation with my parents at least, who were exactly as they always were but are now aware of the full situation, and while they still wouldn't support a full second wedding, they understand that I have an exceptional situation and something exceptional needs to happen. I feel like I should address some things that people are asking me about. 1. I did send condolences and I attended the funeral. By not speaking, I meant since the funeral. I mistakenly thought that would be implied. I'm not heartless. What happened at the wedding day is really hard to talk about it, which is why I phrased it so lightly at the beginning of the story. I was trying to keep things to just what happened with the post and the event, which I can see coming across very strange over text. I'm also aware that I write very formally, but that's not something I can change. And finally, the pictures and caption didn't reference the wedding itself, and there was no lake visible in the pictures. I only used pictures that just had my husband and I in them, and I've sent pictures of just the bridal party before. I never have or will post pictures of the reception. Oh my god. So everything here just completely sucks, let's acknowledge that. I definitely don't think the author intended to hurt anyone by posting about the wedding where one of their friends' children died, but it sure as crap wasn't thought through very well. It's just such an awful situation for everyone, and having what is meant to be a completely magical event, one of the best of a couple's lives together, simultaneously contain one of the most tragic things that can take place? It's just so frickin' dark. I don't think the author should have posted their wedding photos like that. The whole debate just makes me sad, so let me instead weigh in on their awful in-laws, people who I can say are just terrible, crappy humans without reserve. Imagine using this whole event to highlight that this couple are, quote, living in sin, and using this event to satisfy their own religious hang-ups. Gosh darn, but this is all just so damn sad. I don't know why they had to weigh in with this a year later, and after the bride and groom were clearly already going through something rough. Am I the jerk for cussing at a lady in the park? I, a 14-year-old boy, recently took my sister, 4 years old, to a park close to my house. She was pretty excited to go because her dad brought her a bicycle and she wanted to try it out. When we arrived, there was a lady with her 2 sons and a daughter. I made eye contact with the lady and just smiled and waved at her to be nice. After 15 minutes or so, my sister was playing on the swings because she got scared and didn't want to ride the bicycle anymore. I looked away for a second to say hello to my uncle since he lives close to us and he was passing by. And when I turned my head around to check on my sister, I saw she was crying and the lady's sons were using my sister's bike. I approached the kids and politely asked them to please leave the bike alone and use theirs. These 3 kids had brought their own bikes. They ignored me and continued to play with the bike. I decided to go up to the lady and ask her if she could talk to her sons. She responded with, "My kids are having fun and yours isn't using the bike, so I don't see the problem." I then responded with, "I'm aware that she isn't using it, but it's her bike and your kids have their bikes, so I don't see a reason for them to use hers." She then started going on about how I have no reason to talk to her like that if I was going to go around getting girls pregnant, insinuating that my sister was my daughter. At this point, I was teed off and I didn't really want to deal with this lady, so I angrily said, "Lady, that's my sister, and I believe I have the right to talk considering I'm not being a little B-word. So I'm going to ask again. Are you going to tell your little rats to get off my sister's bike or not?" She then got up and told her kids to get in the car. Later, when I got home, I told my mum about it, thinking she'd see it as a funny story. Boy, was I wrong. She started going on about how I was so rude to that lady and that I need to learn respect for my elders. Am I the jerk? No, you're not. You were nice at first, you made your point reasonably, and then she decided that just being of a certain age allowed her to do whatever she wanted, right or wrong. If you think that being told off by a 14-year-old boy is more wrong than letting your kids take toys off a toddler, you need to assess everything you're doing. End of story. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.